right. So today I'm going to be talking about presence. And me and Jasmine, we're going to teach everything when it comes to presence today. Like, I'm going to teach you what is presence, why you practice presence, and I'm going to teach you the whole world of presence. There's a lot to learn about the mechanism of the mind, the mechanism of consciousness, and just the whole world around presence, all the techniques and all the processes and depths. The first thing that I want to talk about is what is presence and why you practice presence. I used to really, really struggle with my thoughts like no other. Like, I used to just was the worst overthinker. I would get triggered all the time and just be nonstop, like mental hell, like 24/7. If anyone just even like looked at me the wrong way, I would overthink about that forever. And life was just terrible. I would be overthinking. And I remember like I was at the age of 16. One day I was like fed up. I was like, I'm gonna if if I had to die doing this, I'm going to literally conquer my mind some way, somehow. And this is, towards the beginning of my spiritual journey, and it felt impossible. Like, thoughts felt like this crazy thing that just is just there to bother you. It seems like everyone struggled with their thoughts, and it felt like this huge mountain to climb. Like, who am I as a 15, 16-year-old kid talking about like I'm gonna conquer my thoughts? Like, that felt so impossible. I was reading a lot of spiritual books. I even had coaching at the time on like spiritual stuff, and it worked to a certain degree, but it was like it would never like kind of quiet this like beast,
Mhm.
this loop that was in my head, this mental prison that I was in. So literally, I was like doing all this stuff to try to help. And then one day, I tell the story all the time. Like, one night in 2016, I was just chilling. This download I had at the time was like focus intensely on one thing at a time, very intensely, like with 100%, 1,000% of your focus. I remember I was on my phone, and I was out as I was reading this little article. I started to, instead of reading this article and being in my thoughts, I started to just read this article with every single word with 1,000% of my attention. My mental chatter instantly quieted so much. And then I got up, and I remember like walking to the bathroom. And as I'm walking to the bathroom, I'm intensely focused on each step in front of me. As I'm in the shower, I'm focused intensely on each step of pumping the soap in my hand, washing my hair. And then as I walk out of the shower, I'm like just sitting there, like just listening to the silence or whatever, like with 1,000% of my focus. And I experienced just the beginning of just so much freedom. I felt so enlightened, and that was the beginning. And I actually, like, I didn't even read any books or anything. It just happened, and just by me completely focusing my intention into the present moment. And at the time, it was just one step at a time. Just whatever is in front of me. One thing. If you're washing dishes, put 1,000% focus on washing the dishes. If you're brushing your teeth, focus 1,000% of your attention on brushing your teeth rather than uh, on thinking about the past or the future, or worrying about the past or the future. So basically, presence, present moment awareness, an effective present moment awareness practice will allow you to master your thoughts. It will help you transcend the the mind, and you will achieve this inner freedom that just we didn't think was possible. And basically, this deep inner peace, deep inner freedom is the norm for us. Like, there's always levels to it, but I think me and Jasmine, we probably take for granted like how normal it is to not struggle with our thoughts, to be able
Yeah,
to feel good all the fucking time, right?
and even when we're not feeling good, just, like, knowing what to do to shift. And I remember, because I started my journey, like you said, you were 18, like, I was, like, what, 28, 29. So it's just, like, at that point, it's just, like, I was just in, like, literally rock bottom. Um, and the one thing like, I had that my download was just, like, to meditate. And I was just, like, meditating, like, while crying, dude, and just, like, full-blown anxiety, but I just, like, kept, going through with it. And I remember just, like, listening to, like, this Buddhist teacher, and when he said, like, "You are not your thoughts," that blew my fucking mind completely. Like, that was the first time I realized it's like, "Whoa," like, it's not me. So just like, all right, if it's not me, then like obviously like I'm above it. Like I can have control over it. And it, like that just like started my whole journey.
So tell me about your experience, like the first time you realized you were not your thoughts. Like, what was that experience like for you?
Thinking back to it, like that's when I kind of went back like to my childhood and just reviewing my life honestly of just like and seeing like how much of a slave I was to my thoughts. And like realizing it's like everything that I've been through and experienced, like it had like this weird hazy glass that was just like, and I couldn't even appreciate even the good moments because like all of the like these intrusive thoughts would come in. Um, and when I got to the point where it was just like I was just being deliberately like just watching my thoughts, like I just realized how hectic and crazy it was. I just and like the concept of being able to quiet my mind, the concept of knowing that damn, I have the power to completely shift my thoughts. Like I don't have to think negatively. Like that's when I realized like dude, like pretty much like maybe 99% of my thoughts were negative based and just like me being self-conscious, insecure, like judging people, like assuming people were judging me, like
Was it hard for you to go from identifying with the mind, identifying with the thoughts, to being able to release your whole identity, to your identity, release your identity with your identity, and release your identity with your thoughts and emotions?
dude, that was such a trippy moment for me. And I wouldn't say it was easy by any means, honestly, especially in the beginning. Cause like you kind of have to go through that like existential crisis, like, damn, like who am I really then if I'm not my thoughts? Um, and I would say at that point, like when I realized that I was able to like have that much control, honestly, on thought mastery, um, I kind of saw like my mind as kind of like a CD player or just like, you know, just like it's like a record of all right, nothing. All of my thoughts are based on my past experience and my current experience right now. So the first thing that I did was just like, all right, like if this is the only thing my brain's working on, like, all right, I got to start feeding my mind with like better, more positive stuff. And that's when I was watching like all these like motivational interviews. Like, dude, like I was just watching like watching so many Kanye West interviews, honestly, just because it's like his confidence is just like all of these positive messages. It's like, I am God. Like, I fully understood like what he was talking about. It's like, oh my God. So I kind of just like kept, and I think I went through that phase where I wasn't quieting my mind. Honestly, that was super difficult in the beginning. So what I did was just like bombarded myself with like positivity and affirmations. And like once I kind of felt that good balance, it's like, all right, like I could think about this instead. Then that's when I was like, oh, okay, like let me just let go of all of this completely and just like try to be as present, as quiet and still as possible and see what shows up.
Mhm. Okay. Um,
How about for you?
so so that night when I became deeply present out of nowhere, um, I remember this moment where it was like I was at the gates to presence, to this other world, and it asked me, "Are you willing to fully surrender? Letting are you fully ready to let go of all of your problems?" And I saw an image of me holding like 20 heavy textbooks, like school textbooks in my hand. And I remember just dropping it. I just realized, okay, all I have to do is drop it. And that's what allowed me to have the conviction to go all in on the
Mm,
present moment. In that moment, I remember dropping the story of my problems, right? Like I I realized in that moment, I never have to think about my problem. I don't have to think in order to thrive. Like if I stop thinking, my world is not going to fall apart.
mm.
That was the biggest thing. That was the biggest obstacle.
I went through that too.
Right. And actually, the opposite is true. When you stop thinking, your world starts to thrive in every way, even more. So that's like the biggest thing. And I was able to drop it because I had some experience with inner work. And I was like, sort of familiar with the process of like realizing I'm not my thoughts. So because I had a slight background in those things, I was able to kind of realize like what I must do in that moment. I was able to fully surrender in that moment. The first thing we want to talk about is identification with the mind, identification with thoughts and emotions. So this is like the core thing. Like if you can understand this, everything will evolve around this. You have to understand that if you're struggling with your thoughts, you're most likely possessed by your thoughts. You believe that you are your thoughts, you are your emotions, and you are attached to your identity. Like I was attached to my identity of this idea of someone named Andy, like I was attached to who I was. I was attached to my thoughts. I thought I was my thoughts. That's the first thing. It's either your thoughts possess you, your identity possesses you, or you are in control of your thoughts and your identity, right? So that's the first thing. If you read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, the concept of the ego is basically your identity, your mind-made identity, who you think you are, this concept that you made, and you're basically, in a sense, worship it. Like it's like everything you do is off of this identity that you're just kind of putting up that you don't even realize it, but it's this identity of you is possessing you. So when you start to break free from your thoughts and your identity, you start to access something way more. But yeah, it starts with breaking free from your thoughts. It starts with becoming the clear sky that contains your thoughts. So you are consciousness, right? You are way beyond your mind and your body and your thoughts. You're literally pure consciousness. You're literally God. And you will realize that the moment you detach from your thoughts and your identity, the moment you break free from all of that. So what present moment awareness allows you to do is instantly access the consciousness, the godlike state that you are, right? And break free from the mind body thought identification. So that is freedom. That is what we're doing here. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Like if you have an effective practice, all of this just happens instantaneously.
And I'm just thinking about the distinction now between like, I don't think present moment awareness necessarily means like you're thinking better thoughts.
No,
I
no,
think
not at
it's like,
all.
yeah, it's like literally completely surrendering and letting go in this present moment
Yeah.
and just
It's
taking the fullness of it without like your ego trying to interpret or like think about what's really going on.
Yeah, so your ego can't function in the present moment. So present moment, and I'll talk about this, I'll get to all this later on. In the present moment, like yeah, your ego literally can't function. Like the moment you become present, you break free and become consciousness, and you break free from your thoughts and emotions. And when you break free, now you instantly become the sky. You instantly become the fullness of who you are, basically. And yeah, like from that place, it's like your ego really can't survive unless you go back into it in that moment. So the first thing that you want to get really familiar with is the idea of being the observer of your thoughts, right? So since you are consciousness, this empty consciousness, you want to start to observe your thoughts. Instead of being possessed by your thoughts, you simply observe them. And I know that sounds super simple, but it's the biggest adjustment you can ever make. When thoughts come up, you as the observer, you as consciousness, simply observe those thoughts. You do not have to go into them. Like you do not have to be possessed by it. You just simply watch your thoughts come up and go. You don't resist them. You can't resist them, and don't judge them. Because if you resist and judge, you instantly go back to mind thought identification. You as this quiet observer who never judges, you just observe your thoughts and emotions as they come up. And that is absolute key to become the observer of your thoughts. So now when thoughts come up, they no longer possess you. They simply are thoughts that flow by you. They're clouds that float past your vast clear sky. That's the first thing that you want to start doing for the beginner. The first thing you want to do to break free is to start being the observer of your thoughts. Start practicing this today. From the moment that you wake up, start to just observe, just watch the thoughts float through your head. Just allow it to be there. If you're watching your thoughts, you are no longer identified with your thoughts. Like you can't be possessed by your thoughts and watch your thoughts. The moment you watch your thoughts, you sever the link of it possessing you. How can you be your thoughts when you're observing it? Like, you're obviously not your thoughts, you're observing your thoughts. So that's the practice. For the very beginner who really struggles, I recommend you to start this by, when thoughts come up, just start to make a habit of saying, this is not me, this is a thought. This is not me, this is an emotion. Just keep pointing it out for the beginner. And then you just really want to move into fully just observing. Just practice this. Just observe, right? Instead of being possessed by it, observe your thoughts and emotions. And doing that will take so much energy away from your thoughts and emotions, because your thoughts and emotions need you in order to survive. If you don't feed these thoughts and emotions and these patterns within you, they will die, because it needs you to feel it. It requires your identification with it to survive. When you observe your thoughts and you're no longer identified with your thoughts, you stop feeding these negative thoughts and emotions just by observing, just by breaking identification. So that's the first key for someone who hasn't experienced this yet. Start observing your thoughts. Just start observing. It's easy. Just observe your thoughts. As they come up, observe them. You're just clear sky. These clouds are floating past you. Observe them instead of being possessed by them. It's a simple adjustment that would change your whole life. And that's the first thing you want to get familiar with, is that.
Imagine like you're in a supermarket and like you're watching like a toddler having a full-blown tantrum, and like their parent is observing them, but it's like their parent is also so emotionally charged that just like they're completely feeding into like this little kid freaking out too. Now the parents freaked out, but then like as a standby, like as a complete stranger, it's like you have no emotional charge. You're literally watching everything. Like sometimes you don't even have to judge that. It's like, all right, like this is what happens sometimes. I saw it like as two levels, because like I remember in the beginning for me too, it's like when I was paying attention to my thoughts, like it was so easy for me to judge them. And I kind of saw that as like the parent watching like your kid just like having a tantrum. But it's like, damn, like no, take it to like one other level of like, not like you could watch both of those interactions going on. Like the thoughts feeding an emotional charge, you judging and feeding into that, and then like finally being the observer. It's like, okay, I kind of see like the full picture of what's happening here.
Stopping the identification with the mind will have you de-energizing your mind. So what's going to happen is you're going to go from thinking like what feels like 100,000 thoughts a day to like 1,000 thoughts a day almost. Like you will reduce your mind chatter by so much.
And realize how unnecessary most thoughts really are, honestly.
They're just hanging out because we're identified with it and feeding it. Very excited to talk about this next part, which is functionality, channeling source, becoming superhuman. So, like I said, this is 2016, summer of 2016. I think I was 17 at the time, and I'm going into my senior year of high school. Right after I had that experience of quieting my mind, I experienced like 2 months of complete bliss, like just complete, absolute like bliss. And that bliss turned more into peace as I got used to it, sort of. During the summer, right, when I was experiencing all this bliss, a part of me got worried. It was like, bro, like I could do this in the summer, but what happens when I go back to school? And I've always had a terrible experience with school, with dealing with people, all this stuff. And I'm like, and school, just like homework, like all this classes, like I'm like, damn, like I was kind of scared. I was like, how am I going to be able to do this in school? Like, is this gonna work? So I went into my senior year of school, and during the first day, like before I went to class, I made a commitment. I'm gonna be fully present this year. I don't care what happens. I remember like thinking, how am I going to do homework and tests if I'm not thinking anymore? If I'm not using my analytical mind, how am I going to pass tests, math tests, psychology tests, Spanish tests, history tests? Like, how am I going to pass these tests if I'm not thinking? Fast forward, I had the best year of my life in every way, even academically, but socially, like I had the best school year of my life. It was like insane. I had 11 years of just terrible experiences with school. And my senior year made everything so worth it, because I became like superhuman that year. And it was like everything was just working out. Even dealing with people was like insane. Like everyone, like my whole experience changed. People who didn't even like me started to like me. Like everyone, like my whole relationship with everyone started changing. Like I could do no wrong. I was just thriving in every way. And I became more of the person who I wanted to be, rather than this person who struggled in every way. So anyways, I just remember my first test, right? I remember staring at this piece of paper with all these test questions on it. And I remember staring at it and completely quieting my mind and taking that test without thinking, without using my mind as a calculation tool, without using my mind as a thinking tool. I completely took this test without thinking, just stared at it with 1,000% of my attention, quieted my mind, and just started to just write and just started to flow. That year, like, I had the best year academically ever without even trying, with just quieting my mind on everything. And I was so shocked. That changed my life forever. And then socially, I used to struggle socially so bad up until the point where I realized, okay, I'm gonna stop thinking about every word I say. I'm gonna completely quiet my mind in every social interaction. I'm never gonna think before I speak ever again. I'm just going to quiet my mind, and whatever flows, flows. And I had the best year socially ever. And I feel like I've been thriving socially ever since. Like, like just communicating like ever since. And high intensity situations like sports, MMA, or some type of business situation, or like dealing with customers or whatever, no matter what it was, I would just deeply quiet my mind. The more I needed to like think, the more I felt like I needed to think, the more I felt like I needed to figure something out or make something happen, the more I just simply quieted my mind. And the moment you quiet your mind, you channel source. So I basically didn't realize it at the time, but I was channeling source 24/7. So I literally felt like I became superhuman. And like just that was such a crazy experience for me throughout my whole senior year of high school. And so the key to all of that is realizing that, first of all, we've been using our thoughts all wrong. Our thoughts are a mechanism for creation. They're not meant to be used as a calculation tool. Your thoughts are not meant to be used to figure things out at all. Like, your mind can do that, but your mind does not have to do that. You can access a way deeper intelligence that's beyond the mind 24/7 by quieting the mind. You have to completely let go of needing to use your mind to calculate in any way. Calculate what you say next, calculate, like, what should I do today? Calculate what you should do with your business, calculate what you do with your life. You don't need any of that. You can completely just, instead of thinking, completely quiet your mind in the moment, and a deeper intelligence will show up. That is the key, is to move away from the thinking mind, needing to figure things out. You don't need to figure things out. And if you feel like you need to figure things out, that is you being afraid to fully let go of thinking, because you believe that a part of it serves you. You believe that a part of it is going to save your life from collapsing versus completely surrendering. Anytime you feel like you need to think, you just quiet your mind even more. When I feel like I need to think, I need to figure something out, I just go deeper into the present moment. And you apply this to everything in your life, and you will become just superhuman in every way. And a few years from now, that will become the absolute norm. Like, operating from the highest level is the norm. And the moment you quiet your mind, you channel source. I basically didn't realize it at the time, but I was channeling source 24/7. I literally felt like I became superhuman.
And after a while, honestly, it becomes like almost laughable. Like when you find yourself like trying to like use your brain and logic to figure things out. And I find myself like, it's honestly like almost like a disservice. And it's like, I feel like I'm cheating myself from like the richness of the moment by like going into my mind so much. And that's usually my indicator too. It's like, as soon as I start like that thought association train, like I'm just like, all right, like get back, like completely surrender.
You feel like you're like cheating yourself, like from like experiencing the fullness of life.
Absolutely.
And that's another thing, where when you look around you at your surrounding, and you look at the plants, the trees, the desk, the table, a lot of us, we look at it through a lens, a label, versus when you look at that tree next to you, you look at it from a place of complete observing, and you look at that tree without this label. Oh, it's a tree, or it's the color green. Like, you look at it directly for once. You observe it directly for without any labels, and it's just there. That makes sense. So you start looking at your whole world without this label. Surrendering, allowing, and presence go hand in hand. You really can't have one without the other. So I think it's a very important thing to be able to fully let go, because otherwise, if you're being present and you don't believe in fully letting go and allowing source, if you don't believe in that, you will convince yourself to go back into the thinking mind, because you feel like you need it for your survival. Eckhart Tolle talks about it this way, like, your identity, your ego has almost like a life of its own. And basically, when you move away from the ego, it feels like it's gonna die, right? So you get like this dying survival feeling, right? So it's hard, it could be at the beginning hard to surrender, because it feels like your ego's dying. It feels like you're dying because you're so attached to your ego, right? But anyways, so you'll get to the point. Some of us has have enough conviction to get there immediately, and it's not perfectly fine of just fully surrendering. You might feel like everything's gonna fall apart, and if you do nothing, right, rather just be present and do nothing, it feels like everything's gonna fall apart. When in reality, everything's gonna start working out for you because the universe is your manager. Like it takes care of everything for you. You just need to get out the way. So that sounds crazy to most of us because most of us have this programming of we need to make things happen, or else nothing's gonna happen, or else you're gonna die. But no, actually, it's the opposite. You do nothing and you start thriving. And you
Yeah,
start,
dude.
yeah, and you start by quieting your mind and like surrendering and allowing.
I was gonna ask a question, like just like from a beginner's point of view, because I noticed that even in myself, when I first started practicing this, like honestly, like sometimes I got a little bit freaked out, like being like fully present and in silence. It was kind of like a trippy moment. It's like, what am I? What am I doing here?
What am I?
Yeah, but you described it perfectly. I feel like it kind of boils down to it's like, yeah, it's like your ego is just like that's the last thing your ego wants, honestly. Like for you to stop thinking and surrender and let go.
Yeah, like it's only crazy for a little bit until you access your true nature.
Then it becomes like the most like almost addictive. It's like, damn, like let me go back into being in that like peaceful stillness state.
And then eventually like us, like it becomes normal and it's just easy, honestly. Another thing I want to mention is it's one thing to conceptualize what I'm teaching you logically. It's another thing to be present and quieting your mind right now and receiving it and experiencing it and receiving my words, my what I'm saying on a whole new level, right? So most of us are living in our minds and we're not living in true reality, right? So once you tap in through quieting your mind, you experience everything completely differently. So it's really like thinking about going to the gym, learning about the gym, but never actually going to the gym. Going to the gym in this case would be simply right now being present and quieting the mind, right? You experience that, everything changes. You just enter another world rather than being trapped in your thoughts. And like I said, you get to the point where this happens effortlessly. Like
Yeah.
this is like normal to us now, right? This is the norm because you are God, you're a divine being. So you want to enter the world of presence. You want to prioritize it. Life becomes better when you prioritize. You want to make your spiritual practice, you want to make your inner world, your presence, your practice, your number one priority. Nothing else mattered. The only thing that matters is your internal world. Nothing else matters. And when you do that, it's going to be scary because it's going to feel like life's going to fall apart, but the opposite happens. You start thriving. You never have to worry about the past or the future. When you start to embrace the present moment and prioritize it, you start winning, you start thriving, and you live in the moment and you're not worried about the past or the future. The past and the future does not worrying about the past and the future does not serve you. You don't need to worry about the past or the future like at all ever, right? Like it does not serve you. Just live in the moment. There is so much divinity in this moment. Everything exists in the moment. The past and the future are a vibration that you experience now if you choose to. So if you have these memories of the past, of trauma, or of these memories that bother you from the past, you have to realize the past has no effect on you in this moment unless you choose to activate that vibration, unless you choose to pick up those thoughts about it, right? Otherwise, your past, nothing has an influence on you in this moment.
I think that's why, like for the average person, things like you listen to like an amazing song, you're watching like the most epic movie, you're eating like the most delicious dish, you're having like your stomach hurts from laughing with your friends. It's like, why do those moments feel so good and delicious? Because we're completely present. You're not thinking about the past and the future in those specific moments. Like you're all in right now.
And
And
when
like
you
and imagine like that step further where it's like you don't even need anything external to feel that amazing and that good right now. And like that's like for me, it's just like that's where the living in from the inside out comes into play. It's just like, dude, every moment can be just as delicious as that.
Yeah, when you're having those moments, you're not resisting, you're allowing. And so there's endless steps of presence. So presence is going to be a journey forever. Like achieving inner peace, deep inner peace, it's just the beginning. just the beginning. But there's also when it comes to presence, you want to be just fully like in the present moment and go deeper and deeper. This part of the series is completely focused on applying the techniques. I'm going to briefly share with you the mechanisms behind the techniques, and then I'll just share with you all the techniques and as well as like the strategies, the processes to apply these techniques. And this is the most important part because now you're actually applying and experiencing the present moment, experiencing source directly. You have to understand that commitment is very key here because you can learn about these techniques, you can learn about presence, and you can sort of just apply them slightly. Like you can just, some people do a little presence technique here and there, but that's not really effective. Like, especially if you have a lot of negative thoughts, like you want to really, really commit yourself to this, especially if you're struggling with your negative thoughts. You just want to be more aggressive with it. Like you want to really dive deeper into this. Okay. So commitment is a big part of all of this. You want to understand that the mechanism behind all this, which is when you practice presence, you naturally become the observer of your thoughts. You naturally detach from your thoughts and emotions. In the present moment, you are able to fully be who you are as consciousness. You'll access that naturally when you're present. So just by being present, you're naturally becoming the observer. As long as you're not judging, as long as you're not pushing against these thoughts and just allowing these thoughts to be and to flow. And that applies to emotions as well. This is one of the main key points, the main mechanism of why we practice presence, naturally activate the mechanism of becoming the observer. I want to talk about the fact that if you start practicing this, you have to remember that everything is energy. Your thoughts and emotions are energetic and they need your attention, your identification with it to survive. What you're going to start noticing is as you practice this, you're going to start every day reducing the amount of mind chatter. You're going to start reducing the amount of energy that these thoughts and emotional triggers have over you. That's the key here. It's like you're not trying to clear everything all in one day, but you'll start making a lot of progress every single day as you reduce the identification and the feeding of these thoughts and emotional triggers. Then what happens is like it gets easier by the day because now it's like less and less powerful every day and your awareness is growing. You're able to just handle things much better. So initially some thoughts and emotional patterns might be very strong and have a lot of momentum, but as you reduce the momentum day by day, it will get a lot easier.
How would you describe mental chatter?
I almost think of it as like just these entities of thoughts and emotion that we're feeding. It's just like this thing that is happening because you're feeding it. So you have this like this whirlwind of thoughts that are going on in your head, and you just got to stop identifying with it as much and just start to stop feeding it as much. And the mental chatter becomes very, very easy to manage.
And then that's like when you could get like way more selective with the thoughts you actually want to think about.
Yes, yes, yes.
And
But
honestly, I would say like it's such a, well, maybe I could say now it's fun having been through it.
yeah.
Um, but honestly, it is pretty fun just to like sit back and really just like see the type of thoughts you're thinking. I think that even blew my mind. Like I'd have a thought and then realize, especially like way back in the early stages, like I'd have a thought and then realize that wasn't even my thought. Like that was just like something like my parents told me or like someone else told me. With these practices and techniques and being present, like all you're doing is removing like the extra fat layer by layer of like what isn't truly you.
Yeah, because we're very identified and caught up with these stories of our life, of our thoughts and emotions. And you really can't see it until you disidentify with it and then you reach that freedom, right? There's so many times like you go through a situation, let's say you go through a situation with a loved one or something at work. And when you're just all caught up in it, when it has control over you, like it's possessing you, you're just all up in it and it feels crazy. And then like whenever I realize like, oh my gosh, I'm not being present. Like I'm literally possessed by these
Yeah.
thoughts in this situation, and instant freedom. Like once you realize I'm just possessed by these thoughts and emotions right now, and to return to that level of awareness, it's like instant solution and freedom, and there's nothing you have to do because when you're identified with the problem and the story and the situation, it feels like life or death. It feels stressful. It feels like you need to do something. It feels like you need to solve something. Versus the moment you start to become aware of this story and this energy that's controlling you, you realize, oh, there's nothing I need to do. I just need to become
Yeah.
aware of what's possessing me and let it go. And then life will just work out every time.
Yeah.
I'm about to go into the techniques. And with each of these techniques, what I want you to do is put 1,000% of your attention into these techniques, right? When you're doing these techniques, put all of your attention into it. That is the key mechanism, is where you're placing your attention, right? So where you're placing all of your intention into one place. The first technique I want to share, this is the one that changed my life in the beginning, and this is very easy to do. Focus fully on one thing. Focus fully on one point with 1,000% of your attention. When I'm speaking right now, if I practice this technique, I'm not thinking about anything else rather than just focusing 1,000% on speaking. Like not thinking about what to say, but just focused on the words that are coming out of my mouth. And when I'm listening to Jasmine speak, I'm 1,000% just paying attention to her speaking. I'm not thinking about the past. I'm not thinking about what to say next. I'm just 1,000% focused. So if you apply this while you're listening to this right now, basically what that might look like is you will just 1,000% just be focused on my voice and nothing else, right? And then you'll lose awareness, like you'll lose focus. Just come back to it. And that's the key to all these techniques is you will lose focus many times throughout the day. And that's normal and that's completely fine. But it's just about coming back to the presence, to the focus. Not about being perfect. When you are focusing, when you are being present, put 1,000% of your attention to it. So yeah, this conversation right now, I'm just fully focused on this moment of just speaking, of listening. I'm not thinking about anything. When you're walking, fully focus on one foot at a time, left foot, right foot. Focus 1,000% intensely on the path in front of you. When you're sitting down doing nothing, you're just fully paying attention to your surroundings. Pick one point and focus all your attention onto it. It could be anything, but just focus on one thing that you could put all of your attention to. And you can get creative with this. Put all of your attention onto it. You're not thinking about it. You're just putting your attention onto it. There's a difference between listening to me right now and thinking about what I'm saying and thinking about your past and having like giving into your mind chatter versus all of your attention onto what I'm saying without thinking about anything. You're listening with your soul. You're just listening from a whole different place.
I was just thinking about like how many times, like for example, in the past, like when I would read a book or like just reading a paragraph and like I would be completely in a different zone in a different world and I'd have to like reread the same paragraph over and over and over and over again. So it's just like it's all about just coming back to it, you know. It's like you can't get this wrong. And one of my favorite things that Eckhart Tolle says is like as soon as you you realize you're not being present, you are. It's just literally, it's that simple. It's just all about the awareness and coming right back into it.
I love that. Perfect. Yeah. So when you're reading a book too, it's like, yeah, your mind's all over the place versus if you put 1,000% of your attention onto the text, right? There's a major difference. So that's something I highly recommend everyone check out. Like, so how can you bring presence into every segment, and into everything you're doing? Even if you're like working a desk job, like when you stare at the screen, put 100% of your focus onto whatever you're doing, onto the text that you're reading or onto the TV show that you're watching versus your mind being all over your place. This really means keeping multitasking to a minimum. Only have one tab open, full focus on it. And it could be very subtle. It's like the difference between driving and your mind is all over the place versus driving with 1,000% of attention in the moment. You want to feel the aliveness of the moment. So second technique, we talked about this, but it's just becoming the observer. So it's just simply observing your thoughts, and it's just simply observing, witnessing your inner world in a very non-judgmental and allowing way. Whatever comes up, just observe it and let it be. Whatever thoughts and emotions come up, just observe it, let it be. Don't try to change it. Don't try to judge it. Don't try to do anything about it. Just let it be. The moment you start judging it and pushing away from it and being scared of it, it possesses you. It takes you over. It comes through the back door and possesses you without realizing it.
And one thing I would do, like especially when I first started out meditating, was I literally just imagined every thought to be just a car just driving by down my street. And it's like you hear it coming, it's like the full volume, and then it's just slowly gonna fade away. And it's just like, so imagine like honestly, like focusing intently on one thought or getting so caught up into it. It's like when you see a car passing by, like you're not going to think about it all day. It's like it's so insignificant. And honestly, that's what our thoughts are. It's so insignificant. And like once you kind of like realize that, it's like it's going to be so much easier to let it go and not judge it. Because it's like it's just going to come up to the surface and then like let it let it boil up, pop, and then move on to the next thing.
I love it. And so if you're a beginner and even observing feels foreign to you, then try something I guess easier, which is just call these thoughts out. So as you go through your everyday, right, just when you're having thoughts and emotions, just call it out like, hey, I'm having a thought, I'm having an emotion right now. This is just a thought, this is just an emotion. So the moment you start to like call it out, you start to realize like, okay, you are not these thoughts, right? So if you have the awareness to even call it out, then you know you're not these thoughts. And I think this is a very good practice for beginners, right?
Dude, I am so loving this because I just like it's just bringing back so many like memories that like I completely forgot about. That's what I did too in the beginning. Like whenever I had like an intrusive thought, I'd literally like sometimes you have to physically yell out like that's not me, that's not
Yep,
me.
yep. And so for this technique, like the calling the thoughts out, even if you're not able to release this negative thought or emotion in the beginning, just start by uh observing them and calling them out. Just start by detaching your identity from these thoughts, right? So you just want to start doing that, and you just be able to stop being possessed by these thoughts and becoming aware that you just want to start becoming aware that you are not your thoughts. If you can start doing that, even if you're not able to let go of these thoughts in the beginning, that's a huge win, because once you start doing that and you start to loosen your identity, the more effective stuff will come with practice. You will be able to go deeper into your practice later on.
Yeah. I really, this is just all the foundational skills that's honestly really required in order for you to master your thoughts later on.
Yeah,
Just being, just observing it. That's all you need to do in the very beginning.
Yeah, bro. Like once you master this, like we got so much more for you. So
Yeah, for real.
so
Catch
much
up.
more. Yeah, catch up. What y'all doing? But it's like, anyways, it's like it's like this used to be like my life's work. Like this used to be all that mattered to me. And I thought this was like the end of like enlightenment. I thought like this was it. And then fast forward to my life now, it's like, wow, what I thought was enlightenment was just the beginning. Like there's so much fun things you can do with all of this stuff. Like whatever you think is enlightenment is just the beginning. Um, the next technique is one of my favorites. It's the inner body technique, and I highly recommend this to almost everyone. And it's just a great technique. So if you just right now start observing inside your body from head to toe, feel the empty space that's inside of your body. It's easy to identify. It's just a space inside of your body. Now take 1,000% of your attention and place it inside your inner body. Anchor your attention inside of this empty space inside your body. Your inner body is always in the present moment. So when you anchor in here, you are present. You want to inhabit this inner body with your awareness, with your attention. And you can go deeper and deeper and deeper into the inner body. So all you have to do is just place all of your attention and anchor it inside your inner body. And as you do that, you will lose awareness, but just keep coming back. And I love this technique because you're able to do everything in your reality and still be in your inner body. And this is when my life started changing. When I realized that whenever I do a task, I don't need to give that task any thought. I don't need to use my analytical mind. I can just go up to the task with full presence in my inner body or with any of these techniques. And that's when my life started thriving. For example, I used to struggle socially because I would think a lot. And it was a big, scary risk at the time to just stop thinking and fully focus inside my body and go into a social interaction. But I just started doing it and I started thriving socially. Even though 1,000% of my attention is in my body and I'm not thinking, I was thriving more than ever. The right words, the right things to say would just come out of my mouth. This apply to everything: work, video games, career, academics, doesn't matter. Fully let go of the need to use your thoughts to analyze or calculate or to think about or overthink or try to figure anything out. You don't need to figure anything out. Anytime you feel like you need to figure things out, go deeper into the present moment. Go deeper into the inner body. So this is a great technique because being able to function with presence is one of the most powerful things you can do. I highly encourage everyone to completely give up figuring things out, using your mind as a calculation, analytical mechanism. Completely give that up. How do you feel, Jasmine?
Well, I just wanted to ask too, because would you say that there's a difference between tapping into your inner body, that empty space, versus literally connecting with your body? What would you say the distinction between that is? Or is there?
I'm not talking about the physical body, right? Like it's the empty space within your physical body. And number two, it's much more aggressive with your focus, right? Because sometimes you say, "Oh, connect with your body." It's kind of like this loose kind of connection, right? Versus 1,000% focus onto the empty space inside your body.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
Yeah. And like once you really feel it, it's like, yeah, people completely understand what you mean by that.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things too, one quote that also like completely changed my life was it was something like what you truly are is between your in and out breath. Just that pure stillness. And I always take that with me. Like whenever I come back to being present, I was just like, that's your true self, just like that emptiness within you.
Eckhart Tolle talks about who you truly are is in between each thought, that gap in between each thought. And presence will allow you to deepen the gap between each thought. So every technique is a portal. Every technique is a portal into presence. Every time you practice presence, think of it this way. You are punching a portal. You're opening a portal between your physical body and your spiritual body. Right? You're literally opening up the hole to source, to allow source to flow through your mind, body, and spirit. And you'll access a deeper intelligence. Once you access this deeper intelligence consistently and you know that it works and you experience it, you'll never ever want to rely on the limited intelligence of a logical mind. The last technique is very simple. It's very similar to the ones I described earlier, but it's just straight up fully being present. Put 1,000% of your attention onto the present moment. Imagine this is the best moment of your life. Don't you want to be fully present in it? What would you do then? Wouldn't you just put all of your attention into the moment instead of all over the place with your thoughts, like just lost in the scramble of your thoughts? Just put all of it into just the present moment. Be alert, fully alert.
And I would say too, like for those that are a little bit extra sensitive, like me, it was completely normal for me. Like, dude, like when I really tap into like the full present moment, like something, it was just so easy for me to like just to cry out of like the sheer beauty I'm experiencing. Like just taking a walk and just like looking at how the trees glisten in the sunlight, like being with my family and just looking at their beautiful faces and just like appreciating them so much and realizing like, wow, like this is the youngest I'm ever gonna see them. Like it's just there's so much beauty to experience. I think that's what I meant yesterday in the part one of present series when I was saying that like not being present really cheats you out of the fullness of the experience that you could be
Of the
having
moment.
of the moment by default. Like this beautiful presence, like it's available to tap into 100% of the time. And it's not something external that you have to search for. It's literally just there waiting for you to be conscious of it.
There's infinite depths of presence. So when you practice this, focus on going deeper and deeper into the present moment, right? Just go deeper and deeper. So all these techniques that I've shared, once you practice it, you will start getting it. Just do it. It's not complicated at all. Just start doing it and you'll get better at it and just keep doing it. There's no way of getting it wrong. Just keep doing it. It's very simple. It's it's just all about application. Now, one of the last things I want to talk about is triggers. So most people make the mistake of getting triggered first and then trying to be present after you're triggered, after you're having a strong emotional reaction. That's not what you want to do. You want to start being present the first thing in the morning. You want to be present before anything can trigger you. What you're going to start seeing is if you can be present and then something that ordinarily triggers you stops triggering you, now the trigger is de-energized. Now it gets easier to not be triggered next time and the next time and the next time, and you deactivate this pattern, deactivate this trigger. But it starts with being present during the mundane moments of your life before the triggers, before things get hectic. When I was in high school, my senior year, I would go into this class and it was full of people that usually triggers me all my life. And I went into that class fully present before I even walked into the class, and everything changed. Like they no longer was able to trigger me because my awareness was very strong because I was fully present. Everything changes. Your reality will lose influence over you more and more and more and more. This applies to all situations. So think of it like this. If there's a car on the top of the hill and it's rolling down, if you stop the car right when it starts rolling, like before it gathers momentum, you can stop the car easily. But if the car is all the way rolling down the hill and you try to stop the car at the bottom of the hill, you're going to get ran over. Right? So it's very important to just be aware and practice this before the triggers. Practice this all day if you can. If not, that's fine too.
Don't be surprised if you realize that like you have way more triggers than you realize. Dude, especially around my family. Like I didn't realize like my whole like body would honestly like just like freeze internally when I would hear them like coming into the building and stuff like that. And it's like I was never aware of that before. This is the whole point of all of these techniques. It's just like just becoming aware of like all of these subtle shifts within your energy and like where your mind's taking you once you experience those. Just take a step back, just become the observer again and go from there.
When you realize you are triggered, that's okay. Actually getting triggered will bring more awareness. So it's a win every time when you return back to awareness. So if you get triggered, try to stay present, try to, kind of transmute some of that energy. But for the most part, just let it go. You're going to be triggered and then start again tomorrow. The triggers are very predictive. It's the same triggers every day. It's like Groundhog's Day. You wake up, it's the same triggers every day. It's just the universe showing you what's active in your thought patterns and emotions and your vibration. As far as applying this, pick a technique, pick multiple techniques. You can do multiple techniques. Sometimes it's good to do one technique. One technique is better than others at a certain point of time, like depending on what you're doing. But take a technique and commit to it. Commit. Do it with 1,000% of your attention as much as possible for now. Think of it as active meditation, right? Think of it as just an active meditation that you're doing all day, right? And you don't need to be perfect, but just chip away at it. Chip away at this energy chatter, this energy of your mind, and just chip away at it. And you'll start having less and less thoughts and emotions in a good way. You start to have more and more inner peace. So I just recommend whoever to be aggressive with your practice, to really be committed to your practice. Even if you can't fully be present all day or whatever, that's perfectly fine. But just do the best that you can. Practice it as much as possible and start with it in the morning, right? Let this be the most dominant intent in your life. Like let this be your number one focus for now.
And I also want to say too, it's just, I don't know, like my heart's been so filled like during this whole talk because like whoever's listening, like I'm so excited for you. You're in this journey for a reason, and this journey is going to be so much more incredible than you can ever imagine or expect. And I'm just so glad you're here.
This is the beginning of enlightenment, and enlightenment is not hard at all. Allowing source, living your best life can be very easy once you have the right practice.
And if you'd like extra help, Andy's also offering coaching services. So whether you need that really personal one-on-one help to release your negative thoughts, to go through these techniques on how to quiet your mind, and you can find the link in the description below.